There were more than 382,000 pre-registered voters in Milwaukee during the fall primary. Only 94,000 actually voted. That's about 24%. Election officials say they expect the fall general election to have a higher turnout.
We expect so based on the fact that the presidential election will be on that ballot. We're certain that there'll be a higher turnout. It creates not a problem but a challenge in the sense that there will be many more voters at the polls, which will mean many more people registering on site and that sort of thing. So the volume of everything will pick up. But in terms of problems, no, those are good problems to have.
Overseeing that good problem is the City Election Commission.
Well, the Election Commission's role is to conduct elections for the constituency and to also disseminate information to the public, be they candidates, the general public, or elected officials, relative to election procedures and laws.
Among those laws, you must register to vote. The Commission would prefer you do that ahead of time to reduce congestion at the polls on Election Day, but you can register the day of the election with proper identification.
Well, I guess the main thing people can do is make sure that they're registered to vote in advance. And in addition to coming here to our office to do that, or perhaps registering with one of the groups that are circulating with these voter registration drives, one can also go to any City of Milwaukee library and register there as well. Those cards will be forwarded to us periodically, and their names will be added onto the rolls, which will prevent them having to stand in line to register. If you haven't pre-registered, you would take proof of identification with you, a picture ID, a driver's license, a pilot's license, anything like that. You would also take a current utility bill, a bank statement, a paycheck, a lease or a property tax bill, anything that covers the period of time for which you're voting.
Who can vote?
Anyone who is 18 years of age, a U.S. citizen, a resident for at least 10 days, and not currently on paper, parole, probation, or anything like that, and also anyone who has not been adjudged as being incompetent by a court. We'll be running that information in the newspaper periodically. We've also got a team of people out distributing flyers in the neighborhoods of both the old and new locations. You can go in a couple of ways. You can call 286-VOTE, which will get you here to the office. You can also go into the city's website at www.milwaukee.gov and pull up the Election Commission's page, and you can find out that way as well.
The Election Commission is again asking those who may have signed up through a voter registration drive to bring proper identification, since some forms were not completed properly. And as in the primary, they are reaching out to the Hispanic and Hmong communities in an effort to make the voting process easier.
Well, we're aware of the fact that the Hispanic and Hmong communities are a rapidly growing segment of Milwaukee. So our desire is to put more poll workers in place in the areas where they reside to enhance their comfort level, to provide translation assistance if necessary, and to make them feel comfortable about the whole process from registration straight through to voting.
You won't see any significant changes this election in either ballots or voting machines. Major mistakes by voters include improperly connecting the arrows or voting for more than one candidate in a contest.
The advice I give to the voters, they can put that ballot in any way. They could put it up, I have some already marked. I think they could put it in, if you don't want anybody to see, you just put it in just like that. You can put it anyway. The only thing my advice to the voters would spit out, the main problem is marking of the ballots. If the ballot is not marked right, it's gonna spit back out at you. I can say the voters aren't doing anything wrong that way. They mark with an ink pen, it's not going in. Red pen, it's not going in. They need to use that number 2 pencil that we supply to the poll workers that day to put out for all the voters to use. If they erase, even made a little dot in between one of the arrows that by mistake and they didn't mean to, that would spit that ballot back out.
In that case, get a fresh ballot and start over. If you've been voting regularly, your name should be on the poll list. If you haven't since the last presidential election, you may have to sign up again.
It's possible in the sense that there is a purge that's done periodically after each presidential election. And so if your name is purged, it would be necessary for you to re-register. If you continue to vote, that activity prevents your name from being purged.
Any advice to the voters in November? use that number 2 pencil, read the instructions, make sure you connect the arrows, don't put a dot, connect the arrows, don't erase. If you do, go back to the table and get another ballot and just take your time reading it, put it in, and get your iVoter stickers and goodbye.
Watch the number of the machine. If it changes, your vote has been counted.
The fact that we have a month allocated to breast cancer, I think that's important because it gives women all over the world an opportunity to say, well, if I forgot then, I'm remembering now.
There are over 2 million breast cancer survivors in the U.S. today. It is the most common cancer in women who have a 1 in 8 chance of developing the disease throughout their lifetime. Women like Hazel Washington of Milwaukee, who for years had an annual mammogram, the most troubling one in April of 2003.
After I had had my mammogram, the nurse from Milwaukee Women's Center called me, and she said, Miss Washington, I need to talk to you. I say, is there a problem?
There was a problem, and a biopsy confirmed that she did have the disease. A lumpectomy last June has been followed by radiation and medication and a positive attitude.
I went through it. I kept right on working, and I went through it. And and then I'm on medication for the next 5 years for the prevention of the cancer not coming back. So otherwise, this is where I am today. I'm fine. I'm back doing everything that I was doing. So I recommend to any woman, please get a mammogram. It's a little uncomfortable, a little bit uncomfortable, but on the safe side, you would rather be a little uncomfortable to be safe now to be sorry later.
According to the American Cancer Society, mammography is highly accurate and detects about 90% of breast cancers in women without symptoms. But it cannot prove that an abnormal area is cancer. That requires an exam by a doctor and an examination of tissue. Discovering breast cancer early gives you a much greater chance of complete recovery.
Your standard screening mammogram involves 4 pictures, 2 of each breast, one from the top of the breast and one from the side of the breast. And what happens during the mammogram is the breast is placed here on this black board. This piece of plastic here comes down and compresses the breast tight for the picture. And this is to help smooth out the tissue so the doctor gets a good, clear view of the breast. Some discomfort is expected during the mammogram, but it is not painful. The compression lasts for about 30 seconds per picture, and then it lets go. So one view is done from the top to the bottom of each breast, and then a second picture with the machine turned sideways to get the breast in an oblique or sideways view.
Our responsibility to the Milwaukee community, of course, is to make you aware that the disease exists and that you are at risk. Then we proceed with education. We provide education for that. And we go out and educate people how to do a clinical breast exam, your risk factors, and of course all women are at risk of having breast cancer. And of course we have 2 clinics that will provide the screening for the breast cancer.
The Milwaukee Breast Cancer Awareness Program offers free mammogram and health screenings at 2 locations for income-eligible women who are uninsured or underinsured. Dr. John Milbrath, an experienced radiologist and unpaid volunteer, reads and interprets all mammograms from the city's screening program.
We have screened over 21,000 women in the 14 years we've been in existence. And if you just multiply that by 4 times, and then some of the ladies getting more than 4 films per screening, that's how many films Dr. Milbrath has read for us. We just cannot thank him enough for what he has done.
Women like Hazel Washington, who know how it feels to deal with breast cancer, says you need the support of family and others when dealing with the disease.
It's very important because this is something that you cannot go through alone. Sometimes maybe at night when you're alone and you look back on it and you just thank God. You just thank Him every single day of your life. But you need that support. You need somebody else to talk to about it.
Among the programs offered by the American Cancer Society is Reach to Recovery, a peer support program so no woman has to deal with it alone. Get more information on all their programs on the web or by calling 1-800-ACS-2345. The Milwaukee Breast Cancer Awareness Program can be reached at 286-2133. And be aware of the disease and its risks in October and every month.
The best message that I can give is please get a mammogram. Self-breast exam is important. And if you feel a lump or feel anything, see your doctor. That's about the best information that I can give, is definitely get a mammogram every year.
I think that they all have their own individual personality that comes out from the stone cutter. And I think all of them are extremely interesting, but you really need to be walking around to see them. It's really hard to see them in a car driving by.
Gargoyles and grotesques stir our imaginations, as they probably did for the stone carvers who created them. Each October, Historic Milwaukee takes a closer look. First, a definition.
During ancient times, gargoyles were used to project water away from the building. The gargoyle term comes from the Latin word gurgulo, which means gullet in terms of the draining. But what's interesting is we often use gargoyle and grotesque interchangeably. The gargoyle is for ones that actually drain water out, and the grotesque is for ones that are more decorative. We're going to start our tour talking about the Iron Block building behind me. It was constructed in 1860 by the Daniel Badger Iron Works. But this is a good example of how you can go big game hunting when you're looking at architecture. The featured symbol on this building is the lion, and you'll see it in a lot of different places. Since this building used to be more in a financial area, it was a good thing to have the lions there to serve as protection. The Mitchell building was constructed between 1875 and 1876 by Edward Townsend Mix. Alexander Mitchell was one time the richest man in Milwaukee. There are more than 150 forms and faces on this building, so you can spend quite a bit of time looking for all the characters that you would see in this building. I would like to point out a couple of them. You'll notice the winged horses of Pegasus, and again, a very popular ancient mythology figure. Some of the other figures that you see is that you look at the entrance, you notice the griffins. And the griffins were again associated with being ferocious monsters that were thought to have guarded the entrances to temples. But again, considering this was a bank, having those griffins on either side of the entrance would have been appropriate to guard the temple, or the money, so to speak. So there's quite a bit of human form and animal form that you see on this building. This lovely Italianate building is known as the Insurance Exchange Building. And as you notice, this poor face has seen a little bit of wear. Some people speculate it could be because he witnessed one of the most tragic fires here in the city of Milwaukee, which was the Newell Hotel fire that is right next door. Well, we're standing in front of the Mackey building that was constructed between 1879 and 1880. The Mackey building was the home of the grain exchange. At one point, city of Milwaukee was a very busy port for grain. You'll notice the winged goddesses on either side of the entrance. They are associated with Nike, who was the Roman god of trade, commerce, gain, luck, and travel, and good gifts. So again, it was very appropriate that that figure would be on this building. And as you go further up, you'll notice the Wisconsin state seal that has been carved there. And then finally, if you notice on either side of the entrance, the boat and the train, and the interesting combination of lion, half human heads directly above that. So again, some interesting figures on this building. This is the old Federal Building that was constructed between 1892 and 1899. There's a lot of interesting faces on the Federal Building. You see the dragons that are up on the corners of that roof line. and again, more of the grotesque type figures. Dragons have been part of architectural ornamentation for over 3,000 years. And then directly above them, you'll notice the different faces that are interspersed among the foliage. So you have to look closely to notice the different ones, and they all have different personalities. And that was, again, really up to the stonecutter in terms of how they wanted to portray these figures. The stonecutters often use gargoyles to portray their patrons or colleagues in a grotesque form. So kind of a fun way to get back at your ex-girlfriend if you wanted to as well. If you look at the top of the tower, you'll notice what looks to be gargoyles again at the very top pediments. And again, actually these are grotesque, but again add to the ambience of this building. If you look at the arches, where the arches come together above the windows, you will see different dragons in each of those points where the arches come together. As well, along the roof line, you'll see the different human faces at different points in time. Again, with a lot of different personalities there as well. One of my personal favorites is the gentleman behind me with his the appearance of that he's blowing hot air coming out of his mouth. Again, we wonder, okay, was the stonecutter thinking about what was going to be actually happening at the Federal Building here? And it was his personal commentary. This one reminds me of Dopey with his very large ears. Again, you wonder if the stonecutter had a friend who had large ears and decided to exaggerate them for the purpose of this fellow. Again, going with the Snow White theme, she reminds me of the Queen in the Mirror. Now we're in front of the Northwestern National Building. This building was constructed between 1904 and 1906. On this side of the building, you'll notice that there are different cartouches with figures above there. If you notice these three faces here on the cartouches, you get a very different feel looking at each of them. On the Jackson Street side of the Northwestern National Building, there's a nice variety of faces, and some of them are pretty scary looking. And we don't really know what the stonecutter was thinking. It could be he had a bad day when he was doing that one, or he was upset that he wasn't getting paid. So a lot of times they would, like I said, do things of their patrons. We just really don't know, but it is interesting to speculate what was going through their minds as you see the differences. Well, we were talking about how you can go big game hunting in architecture, looking at some of the ornamentation, and I think a great one to look at is the Wells Building across the street here. If you notice the cartouches on either side of that corner, on one side of it is an owl, and on the other side is a hawk. Directly above it, you'll notice that there's a series of foxes looking down. But we always like to end on a high note, or an angelic note, as the case may be. And we talk about the Railway Exchange Building that's behind me, that was constructed in 1899 in the commercial style. And the figures I want to point out to you are the angels that are holding the different cartouches on the corner of the building. And they just look like sweet little figures smiling down on the pedestrians of Milwaukee, who most likely are walking by and never even seeing them.
Stone carvers like to create these fantasy creatures. People like to see them. You can see even more than we've had time to show you on your own or with a formal tour.
We have a gargoyle tour that is on October 24th. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and it's done at a fairly leisurely pace. And it's just a real fun tour to enjoy right around the Halloween time. I think you should come and see these gargoyles and figures for yourself. You'll never see the building the same way again once you've gone through and taken a moment to look at these different figures that are here in downtown Milwaukee.